Welcome back to Final Resonance TV and episode number 60 of Van Halen Stories. Today I have an awesome guest all the way from LA for you, from Whitesnake, Dio, Revolution Saints. He played with Glenn Hughes and, of course, is now part of the Dead Daisies. And you know him as, obviously, Doug Aldrich from all those projects is here with us today to talk about Van Halen, but we're going to talk about some other things too, some Randy Rhoads in the mix today. Yeah. And tell me about Dead Daisies. What's going on with Dead Daisies before we get going? What's the current situation?
We're off at the moment. We're taking some time off to just, everyone's doing other things, and we might kick up something in the summertime, get together and play a little bit. In fact, I was even thinking of going to, seeing if we could arrange a jam in the next few months, just something fun to do. But we wanted to kind of take a little hiatus. We've been making records after records after records, and we had a really great run. First of all, we had Glenn Hughes in the band from 2019, and we did a couple records with Glenn. And then immediately we did a best of, and then John came back. We did 2 records with John, including a blues record that was called Looking for Trouble that was really, really great and fun to work on. And then we've been touring the whole time, since COVID was over. Right. We've been busy. So we decided this year it would be good to just chill a little bit, take some time, regroup. And people are doing things. John's doing his solo stuff, and I've been basically being a stay-at-home dad at the moment, which is, it's great. It's like, I think about when I came out to California and when I first, was influenced by guys like Eddie and Randy, and I'm out here now and I'm in my 60s and I'm a dad and I freaking love it, bro. I mean, I love to tour. I love to play guitar. I write songs all the time and do sessions and whatnot. I'm working with Black Star amps heavily at the moment, which has been really, really cool and fun. So there's a lot of stuff going on, but being home is I'm taking advantage of that to be with my kids.
I saw your video with your daughter going to work with you at NAMM.
Yeah. Basically, I just the Daisy said, "Hey, what are you doing?" I go, "I'm going to go down to NAMM." They go, "Well, film it." And I go, "Well, it's hard for me to do that." They go, "Well, get your wife to do it." So I was like, that could be fun, because every time I go to do stuff, like if I'm by myself, if I'm with the band, it's cool. I don't mind, I'll go away or go on tour. It's no problem. But I don't really like going by myself to like guitar clinics or stuff like that, or the NAMM show. So I was like, I got my wife and my daughter a badge, and my son was busy. He had soccer stuff going on, but my daughter, she thought it was really cool, and she felt like kind of like the amp that Black Star does is called the Ruby. It's a DA100 Ruby. And so everyone at Black Star was like, "Oh, Ruby, come here." It was really cool.
Cool.
And and my wife just got a bunch of footage, and we were joking around trying to do funny stuff, like little funny skits that they didn't end up putting in the video, but like, just there was some funny stuff that happened on accident, like, just try to carry my amp by myself, and I'm like, "Come on, somebody, who can?" My guitar sliding off my shoulder. I locked myself out of my room. I couldn't find my car in the parking garage. So I was just filming all this stuff. But yeah, my daughter, so being home has been great. And my daughter is at an age where it's super important to her as much time as we can all be together.
Right. That's cool, man. Good to see that. It was a really good video too. I enjoyed watching it.
Thanks. Yeah, it was fun.
It was cool. One thing that I learned about you that I didn't know is that you auditioned for Kiss in 1982. Is this true?
Yeah. It's so weird because I mean, I've talked about it literally dozens and dozens of times, maybe more. And
wow.
The first thing I want to say is that I sometimes have told the story and it maybe came off the wrong way, but I'm a huge fan of Gene Simmons and the whole Paul and all that. They're friends of mine, Gene is a very respectable person, and not just musician, but like as a dad, as a person, as a human. I think, he's really awesome. And of course, Paul's super talented as well, and Sweetheart, all the guys. I only knew Ace a little bit, and I never knew Peter, but Eric, when I first got to LA in 1981, I was playing in some clubs. It took literally a couple months. I was in a band, and I got a job in a music store, and this girl said, "Hey, Kiss is looking for a guitar player, and my boyfriend is Eric Carr." And I was like, "Really?" So I hadn't heard about it. There's no internet or anything like that, and I didn't know if it was true or not. But a couple of weeks later, we were playing again at this place. It was Guitarist on the Strip, where Van Halen used to play.
Right on.
And so I was playing there, and here in comes that girl, and she's got Eric with her. And I'm like, I couldn't tell for sure it was him because I had never seen his face without the makeup.
Right.
But it was him. And eventually, long story short, I did play with them in the studio and put down some, some solos and stuff on some of their stuff on Creatures of the Night as a test. And I'll never forget, Gene said to me, "Doug, it sounds really good, but do you ever use major scales?" And I was like, "What's that? What's a major scale?"
Right.
He goes, "Do, re, mi." I'm like, "Oh, like, of course I know that." So I started incorporating in my mind. That was, you got their major pentatonic and your minor pentatonic, and I was playing minor pentatonic during the song, so I started mixing in some major pentatonic, kind of like a Michael Schenker sort of flavor, Mixolydian mode, it's called.
Right.
And as you know, and he's like, cool. So he wrote down some songs, and we ended up jamming in this. It was called SIR Studios. It was their big room. It was basically like an arena, and it was my first time playing through. I think I had 4 stacks of Marshalls. And the band's playing. I'm on stage playing with Kiss. It was crazy. I played like three songs, and we went through them a couple times. The most difficult one for me was Black Diamond.
Right.
It was different. It was now it would be super easy for me, but at the time I didn't know that song, and I hadn't really heard it. So I remember us going over it a couple times, and then I went away, and then a couple weeks later, they called me back and said, "Hey, we want to play with you again." And I was like, "Whoa!" So I went to another room at SAR, and we played, and it went good. But I think after playing, just sitting, hanging out, talking, it was pretty apparent that I was too young. I mean, I was just a kid. I was 18, but really, like, mentally, and I know now because I'm a dad and I got 16-year-old kid, but I was definitely like very immature for 18. And these guys were worldwide stars, so it just wasn't the right fit for them, of course. Right. Although I think they liked my playing, and it encouraged me a lot. And I got good props from friends that were like, "Whoa, man, did you hear Doug was jamming with Kiss and whatever?" So that was cool.
That's
but
cool.
The funny part is that later Kiss they were on tour, and my buddies were like, "Hey, can you call up Gene?" Because Gene gave me his number. And I called him, and there was a party going on. And basically, long story short, this is where some people think, "Oh, Gene was not nice to me." Well, he didn't know who I was. I called him at his house, and there was a party going on, and he's just like, he basically just was like, don't call me like this, or whatever. It was not mean. It was just like,
Right.
What you would do if someone's, you don't know who it is, like asking them for tickets to the show.
Right.
I didn't even know what backstage was. It was just like, "Hey man, can we get some tickets?" Because we didn't have any money. And
of course not.
And he basically, it was a kind of a no. I don't remember, whatever. But it was funny, and I just told my guys, I'm like, "Sorry guys, I talked to him, but Right. But later I bumped into Gene. There used to be this workout class in the San Fernando Valley, and I bumped into him at this workout class. It was like called Taibo, and he was always nice, really nice, and obviously a crazy intelligent person. But yeah, that was my Kiss story.
Well, that's cool because he was part of the original discovery of Van Halen in the club at the Starwood. You know the story about that. So when do
Now I
you?
do. I didn't know that
You didn't
story.
know
I
that?
mean,
Wow.
I was very unaware of many things, but
Yeah.
yeah, that now I know. I've heard the story, and then I've heard the story around that time where he went to Gene and said, I want to be I want the gig, and
Right.
Gene's like, no, 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 no. What are you doing?
Right. Right. You would have to wear the makeup.
I think
Maybe not though, because they switched there not long after.
it. No, but I mean, not me. I wouldn't have cared, but it
Right.
was. I think they did say something because I heard somebody else say it. Would you be okay to dye your hair black? And I think I'm sure I said yeah. I don't know,
Wow. That's
but
cool.
anyways, it didn't happen. And the good thing is you know, they got Vinnie Vincent and made a really well. Creatures of the Night was kind of a mixed record because they got a bunch of guest guitar players I think on there, and then
Hmm.
Ace did a little bit,
Hmm.
and then they finally got Vinnie Vincent in the band, and that was cool. They did that. Lick It Up record was really good, I thought.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I was it was just a great experience, and it basically encouraged me to get really serious about guitar. And later I did learn enough to where I could start teaching. I had a lot of requests for people teaching to
Hmm.
teach them, and through teaching, I could make really good money because everybody wanted to learn guitar, and B, I was forced to learn all the theory and fundamentals that I could, so I could do a proper lesson for the kids.
Right.
And that was great. I played guitar all day long, every day, and I was definitely inspired by Randy on that one.
Yeah. I was going to ask you. You come into L.A. in that era, the early '80s, right? You just said. What was your first connection to not only Edward, what you heard, but with Randy? What was the first thing you heard from Randy and Edward?
First thing I heard from Edward was, well, both of them actually. No, I take that back. First thing I heard from Edward was live. I never heard him on the radio.
Okay.
It was 1979. They were headlining a place in Philadelphia where I was living, where I was in high school, and we used to take the train down there to the Spectrum, and the tickets were cheap, man. It was like $8 or $6. I can't remember. We go to as many concerts as we could, and we were in line outside, and I was like, "Who are we seeing again tonight?" It's like Van Halen. Okay, cool. I don't know, Van who? Like it's a weird name.
Right.
And then they came on stage. First, the lights went down and the curtain went up, or the curtain went down. I forget. But you could see the most giant backline. It was 18. It was 18 4x12 cabinets on Eddie's side, and I had never seen 4x12 stacked three high.
Right.
So I was like, "Whoa, what the hell is this? This is gonna," And then Eddie just did one of those moose call things, on the low string, and it was just like rattled me right there. And they came out, and I was just floored, man. So that was my first time. And then, of course, I went immediately and bought the records. There was two records, so I bought them and just devoured those records. It was so cool.
What were the songs that hit you? I mean, obviously, Eruption was probably a big thing, but what else?
Eruption was big. I mean, Running with the Devil, I just thought was just so massive. It was like a massive wall of sound, and then everything on the first album was just pure fire. And then on the second album, it started with "You're No Good," I think, and that was more of a weird, trippy thing, kind of along the lines of "Running with the Devil." But I initially was better at learning the second album. There was riffs like "Somebody Get Me a Doctor" and "Light Up the Sky." Those were songs that I somehow got lucky and could figure those out. I wasn't really playing lead at the time, so I would dabble in it, but I was just really trying to get my rhythm together. And those that for if I had to pick one, I definitely remember early on learning it was Somebody Get Me a Doctor.
Right, right. Great riff. Great song.
Yeah, I probably was playing it wrong, but it sounded close, so I was happy.
Yeah, he had very like it was really strange for me learning his stuff. Like some of the stuff would seem really easy to me, but then when I would get my hands on it, I was like, wait a minute, this is not as easy as I thought it was going to be.
Well, he was just a natural, and he did it. He did what came natural to him,
Right,
and it's like anything. You do it if you come up with it and you play it your way.
right,
Nobody's going to catch the exact same things all the way through as you do. You yourself or
right,
anybody out there that's playing an
right.
instrument. Once you let go of trying to copy what the other guy, what your hero's doing, and go, I can't do it like him, so I'm going to do it my way.
Right,
And then
right.
that leads to you kind of finding which it kind of starts the beginning of getting your own style together, because if you can do it exactly, that my hat's off to you, but I could never do that.
Yeah, well, I saw you do "Crying in the Rain" at NAMM. I think I told you this, but dude, that was insane. What you did. I mean, I know that you're like you said, you're making that Sykes thing your own in the middle of this thing, but man, it was an
Well,
incredible.
I wasn't trying to make it my own, and that's what I'm telling you. It's like
Yeah,
I want to pay respect to John Sykes, because I loved his playing in 1987 or 1985, and then I kind of went back and listened to his stuff with Thin Lizzy,
right,
and really liked it, because I loved Gary Moore. In 1982 or three, he had Quarters of Power, and that was the first time I heard of Gary Moore.
right.
And then when I heard John Sykes, I'm like, oh man, he reminds me like Gary a little bit. I love it. And I met John a bunch of times, and he was always really kind. Even when I was in Whitesnake, when he was supposed to be in Whitesnake, and David said, "No, let's get the new guy." But I wanted to pay tribute to him at the NAMM show, and I haven't played that solo for 10 years or something, really. And I tried to practice it and make sure it was. I tried to do it like John, but then inevitably somewhere in the middle, yeah, I was like, okay, now I missed it. Let me refer back. Let me just pass back to the defense and play it my way.
Right.
Um, and
Right.
then catch up back I caught back up on the tapping part.
Right. That's a cool part too. I was like, just watching you go through it though. It was really seamless for me watching it. I mean, I know you, like you said, you're trying to piece the two things together, but it didn't. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't tell that.
Thanks.
It was
Thanks,
amazing.
man. Yeah, it's like that. I mean, anybody like yourself, anybody that performs and does gigs and stuff, when you make a mistake and you're like, damn it, and you think everybody knows, but out front, it's very rare that you can hear it.
Right.
It's some of those little details get kind of lost in the mix, or you know, there's two or three or four other guys up there playing the right part, so then nobody even knows. So
Yeah. Yeah.
can't. But if I was going to give advice to somebody, it's like, don't sweat anything. And Eddie said it too. He's like, some of my, I got mistakes on the record, and you and I are both listening to Eddie going, there's no mistakes. There's none. There's none. What mistake was he talking about? But
Right.
to
Right.
him, there was a mistake, and he just left it.
Right. 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 I remember him saying that about Eruption, how he said, I missed a couple of things. And it was like, what? Nobody ever noticed any of that.
No. Did you ever hear that tape of it was like the room mics
Yes.
during of Eruption?
Yeah. With the feedback in it.
So cool, man.
Right. That's an awesome
God.
thing.
Yeah.
That's cool. So, like the other albums after the first two, I mean, I guess you devoured all of those albums as you went, right?
Well, when I say devour, I'm not saying like I was picking apart the leads and stuff, because, like I said, I was still learning how to play lead guitar,
Yeah.
and then remember, this was like 1979, 80. I didn't come to LA and do the, I didn't know what a major scale was in 1982 whenever I met you. But I was playing solos at that time. I just didn't know what I was doing. But no, when Van Halen, when the third album came out, what was it called?
Women and Children.
Women Children First. I was in I had been doing badly in school, and my parents sent me in 11th grade to a boarding school.
Wow.
But and it was in upstate Pennsylvania. And it turned out, I didn't want to go because I wanted to, be with my friends. That we were jamming every weekend, and I just wanted to be with my guys that we played music together and we listened to music together and all that. So they sent me to this boarding school where I was living and going to school, and it turned out to be the greatest experience ever because they let me bring. I had at that time. I had a little. I had a half stack, I think, and I had my gold top Les Paul, and they let me take that in my stereo system, and I had a dorm room where I could just sit and play all day, and it was like, this is awesome,
Wow.
No, so like, they said, you didn't get good enough grades, so we're not going to let you come back. So I went back to high school the next year, but I went back a better guitar player.
Wow.
So the boarding school thing was like a blessing in disguise. And so Women and Children first came out, and I would devour it in terms of listening to it and just getting the vibe off of it.
Right.
Since I was in a dorm, it was mostly headphones that I would listen to, and that record came out, and it just had that Van Halen thing again. It was killer. And then of course that would have been the second tour that I saw, was in 1980.
Right.
So like,
again, big stacks, big, huge thing.
Yeah, it was insane. So yeah, I mean, and then the last one that I got when I was living at home was when Fair Warning came out.
Right.
And Mean Street just smoked. Man, it was just so cool. Some people say it's a little darker record, right?
Right.
But that was that riff. I mean, I never heard anything like that. It was just ripping.
That G chord, right? The open G chord and that whole. It's just something about that. Just still to this day, just blows me away.
Wait, is that in G?
Well, when you're playing an A and then you go to the G chord.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that what's funny is I just had Jeff Scott Soto on 2 days ago or a day ago, and that's what he said. He said that was his favorite song, Mean Street.
It was so cool, man.
Me too, man.
I mean,
I was like, wow.
It had the fire, but it also had this crazy mood. Like, it was like made you. The thing about Van Halen is it made you feel strong. It made you feel. It gave you power. When you listen to Van Halen, it made you feel bigger than life. Like you felt like, yeah, I'm cool, because I like this stuff, and it's
right.
And it was like, they were still coming up in those first few albums. So like, if you knew, you knew. It was one of those things, and so we were like part of a pack, all of the kids that liked Van Halen.
Yeah, that's what I've noticed. We all kind of grew up in the same, where Kiss was kind of maybe the first thing we really got, rock, and then all of a sudden Van Halen was the next thing that we took on, and it was a big deal.
So I'm a little bit older than you, maybe, because my first stuff was Deep Purple and Zeppelin and stuff like that, and there was, the Eagles and the Allman Brothers and Southern rock was really big to me. Mm-hmm. I really loved Leonard Skinner, especially, but my sister had record players. I didn't have one, and my little sister had Kiss Alive and Alive 2.
Okay,
and she had Queen. Those were the three that I remember she had that were really cool. And then my older sister had Friend Becomes Alive. And she had Jeff Beck, Blow by Blow, and Stevie Wonder. Songs in the Key of Life, maybe, I think. I'm not sure.
Yeah, right.
Excuse me. And so hearing Jeff Beck, really, that was like, he was kind of my favorite guy until I heard Zeppelin 2. And then it was that. And then somewhere along the line, I got turned on to Black Sabbath because the song Iron Man was popular.
Right.
And then eventually, getting a guitar myself, the first real rock riff I kind of learned how to play was Smoke on the Water.
There you
go. A million other people. So later it was when I heard Kiss and stuff like that. Was my younger sister had that stuff. But I eventually did get a record player, and then, of course, I had the Van Halen stuff. I had Aerosmith, UFO, and I actually kind of knew more about. I knew Deep Purple a little bit because of Smoke on the Water and that stuff, and Mistreated. But it was Rainbow on stage live album with Ronnie was kind of that was really a big record.
Right.
So,
right.
But seeing Edward play was like, it was like just being, you know, having a flamethrower of coolness hit you, and it just.
One of the things I want to talk to you about is like, you know, this Randy Rhoads and Edward Van Halen always is kind of a thing. And you've had exposure to both. You saw Randy live as well.
Yeah.
And you met Randy, right? As well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. So when you saw Randy, it was only right in that a year or two later in 82?
No, it was actually in 81.
Okay. So Diary of a Madman.
He died. I never saw the Diary tour.
Okay.
But I saw him play. I think it was early 81. Yeah, I think it was like May of 81, around that time. I was in senior in high school and was starting to warm up, and I heard Ozzy Osbourne song on the radio. And of course, we had already been digging, you know, Black Sabbath with Ronnie at that point, and that was a big album, Heaven and Hell.
Right.
So we hadn't really heard much about Ozzy. And then on the radio, they played I Don't Know. And I'm like, damn, that sounds awesome. And it was like, tonight at the Tower Theater in Philadelphia. And I was like, oh, shit. So I called my buddy and go, hey, Ozzy's playing, you know, that's at the Tower Theater. And you want to go? And he's like, cool. So I go over to his house. We're sitting there having dinner with his parents. And his dad was like, where are you guys going tonight? We're going to go see Ozzy Osbourne. He goes, Ozzy Osbourne? Who the hell is that? Who names their kid Ozzy? What kind of name is that? You know, we're just like, no, that's just, you know, his name's something else, but they call him Ozzy. Right. So we drove down there, not knowing what to expect. Bought tickets. Actually, we bought tickets at the venue. We went to his house, had dinner. Then he drove, and we went to the theater, went to the box office, got tickets, and we walked to our seats, and they were fourth row, right in front of where Randy was going to come. And Motorhead was opening, and Motorhead was, you know, I didn't understand that kind of music yet. You know, I was definitely, that was more punk-ish, and it didn't connect with me at that time. It was cool, but it was, the mix wasn't great, you know, opening act stuff. Right. But when Ozzy came out, Randy comes out, and immediately it's just like, there's this angel playing guitar, and the guy looked so like angelic, and it was just the fiercest, meanest riffs coming out, like dark, fucking classical, mean riffs coming out. And so after that show, I said to my buddy, we were standing outside, and I'm like, man, that guy might be better than Andy. I don't even know. I mean, maybe he's as good, maybe he's better. I don't even, what did we just see, you know? Mm-hmm. And then, of course, I bought the Ozzy record, and I just couldn't find out enough about Randy Rhoads. There wasn't much out there about him really at that time, but I was smoked and blown away by him. And then and his tone was equally as cool, but very different than Eddie's. Mm-hmm. And his style, obviously, you know, the tapping, he did some tapping stuff a little bit, but he had these classical runs that Eddie wasn't doing that. Right. He was doing his own thing. So that was kind of made that sort of like Randy's thing. So then I moved to LA in 81 August. I got out of school in June, and I stayed home for a little bit. I don't know why, but I ended up getting out here in 1981 August. And it was somewhere, I met a kid, and he called me and he goes, hey man, do you want to come down to the Whiskey? Because Randy's going to be playing. I'm like, Randy? And he said, yeah, Randy Rhoads. I go, you mean the guy from Ozzy's band, the English guy? He goes, no, he's not English. He's from Burbank. And I think I told you this, my version of it.
No, you haven't.
Well, anyway, he goes, he's from Burbank. I'm like, what? The English guy? He lives in Burbank? No, he's from Burbank. He's a California guy. I'm like, whoa, that's crazy. He goes, I used to take lessons from him. I was like, from Randy Rhoads, you took lessons? He goes, yeah, he was my teacher. So I'm like, okay, let's go. So I had a fake ID and he had an ID and we got into the whiskey. He was playing with Kevin DeBro. He was going to sit in. And I don't know how Eddie found this out. That's something I have to ask him one day. How did you find out? Because, like I said, there's no internet. There's no, like, you know, maybe there was something on the radio. I don't know. But we go there. We go to the backstage of the whiskey and knock on the door. And the bouncer says, you know, you guys aren't allowed back here. And right then, I heard this voice going, hey, man, hey, Eddie. He goes, hey, man, let those kids in. And at the top of the stairs of the whiskey, I'm sure you've been there. Mm-hmm. He goes, hey, Eddie, what's up? I turn around. There's Randy Rhoads at the top of the stairs, like as far, like super close, like I was at the concert. And the first thing Eddie goes, hey, this is my friend Doug. He wanted to, you know. I'm like, Randy, man, I saw you play in Philadelphia, and it was like, you blew me away. So he's like, thanks, man, that's really cool. And so he chatted with us for a minute, and then we excused ourselves and went, and he played a couple songs with DeBro, and I was just like, my head spinning, you know, like, holy shit, I never met a rock star before, and he was really nice, you know, and such a great player. His charisma of him on stage, you know, you got guys that are really great players are on stage, and everyone's got the same amount of time on the earth and everything. But when Randy walked on the stage, it was just like, it just made it. It was just, he had this persona that was just very huge. So like, I go out of that club, and I never thought to go try to talk to him again. Or I never thought about, even when we saw him play live, I never thought like, hey, there's the tour bus. He's probably on the bus right now, which he probably was. But we never thought about like, should we go knock on the door or something? We just didn't. It just didn't occur to us, you know. We were just like rock stars. That's how they, you know. And it didn't occur to me that probably Van Halen, every time they came to Philadelphia, they probably came the day before and they were hanging out at the Denny's or whatever, you know. And it just never occurred to me. Right. So meeting Randy was like my first, like, wow, that's heavy to be able to meet a real rock star, a guy that actually made a record, you know, and it's so good. And then a week later, Eddie called me again. He goes, hey, Randy's going to play with DeBro again or somebody at the whiskey. I'm like, okay, see you there. And I walk in the whiskey, and Randy's in the doorway right at the bottom. And hey, Doug, how you doing, man? He's like, shook my hand. And I'm like, I was dumbfounded that he remembered my name.
Right.
And he was like, how are you? I'm like, good, Randy. Nice to see you. Nice to see you too, man. All right, I'll catch you later. And I was just like, the coolest guy ever, you know. Wow. And of course, he played great, you know. And that was the last time I saw him and last time I heard him, because he, you know, obviously in '82, in I guess it's March.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Is when they March 19 something is when the plane crashed, and that was, you know, at that I was working in this music store, and I'll never forget, it came on the radio, and it was like, there's been a plane crash, and some members of Ozzy Osbourne's band were involved, and then, you know, so far, you know, confirmed is Randy Rhoads and Rachel Youngblood and Andrew Aycock, the pilot. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, what did he just say? You know, it's surreal, you know.
Right.
So like it was for everybody, of course.
Right. Randy, that was interesting what you said about Randy when he came out on stage the first time you saw him. Like, you said he was like an angel, but he was playing all this kind of, you know, opposed music to the image, I guess, is what you said.
Yeah, man. I mean, you know, it was definitely a great sales thing that Ozzy came up with. You know, it was the Prince of Darkness, you know, all that stuff. And then he's got this angelic guitar player, but playing these mean riffs that, you know, that only God could let Randy do it, you know. It was just weird. It was very, very cool. And the other thing is that Ozzy's band, you know, with Rudy and Tommy as well, that was a fierce band. That was like, because, you know, you got Ozzy who's just amazing, mm-hmm. and you got Randy and the band, and and that was a rivalry a little bit for Van Halen, because Van Halen was that, you got David Lee Roth, the guy that is probably one of the greatest frontmen of all time,
Right.
and Alex, one of the greatest drummers, and Michael had his thing. So it was like, here's the yin and yang, right, of the early '80s. These are the two front runners, guitar players of the early '80s. I guess.
Right. I was going to say that I had said this before, but there was that period from, well, 78, when kind of Van Halen reintroduced the rock thing, and then it went to 83, 84 when Quiet Riot kind of became huge. Then it became the glam thing. There was that period in the early days where it was more of a raw kind of experience, less of the glam thing that people got to know over the years and that got associated with in a weird way. But that's kind of what I was introduced to too, that initial phase with in the early 80s.
Yeah, and there was a whole, when I first got to LA, the first night I went to the Troubadour, and there was like a fusion band playing. They were amazing, but it was not a scene. And up on the Strip, on the Sunset Strip, when I went that first time to the Sunset Strip was probably around when I met Eddie at the Troubadour. It might have been the first day I was in California. Because I got here, and that night I took my car and drove down Santa Monica Boulevard to Hollywood, and I just saw the Troubadour. I'm like, that's a rock club. Okay, I'm going to go in. And I met Eddie around that time, if it wasn't that night. So the first time I get to the Sunset Strip was Whiskey, and it wasn't the scene like it turned out to be 5, 6 years later, where basically on Sunset Boulevard, both sides of the street, as you know, it was just jam-packed with bands walking around and guys, musicians, women, everything was just like this crazy scene that you'd never heard or seen before.
Right.
So
with Guitarist in the middle of it, and then the Whiskey, and then of course the Roxy, and all of that, all the way up and down that area was inundated. I did get to the Guitarist before in the early days, well, not late, the later days I should say, of the club, and I actually got to see a show there, and so I did get a little bit of that era. It was early '90s when I went there, but yeah, I was still there.
Right. I wish that place was still there. That was cool. Basically, for people who don't know that was basically like a square building, and you had 3 levels, I think there was. So you had the floor level, then you had the second level, third level, and you'd have a stage here, and here on each level. So there was 9 stages, basically. So there'd be 9 bands set up, and then it would be like, okay, this band's playing now, then this band, then this band, then this band, then this band. And it meant that it was constant music and a shit ton of bands playing in a venue. Like, you couldn't do that at the Roxy. It had to be like 2 or 3 bands.
Right.
So like, I didn't get to see Van Halen ever in a club, obviously, but I remember I did see the first time I saw Stephen Pearcy. He had Jake E. Lee on guitar.
Right.
And Matt Thorne on bass, and I think it was Dave Alfred from Rough Cut on drums. And I remember going up to Jake after the show, because it was just, in the club at Guitarist, and I said, Jake, all right. His name was Jake Williams at that time, and I thought, that's a cool name, Jake. I never knew anybody called Jake. And I met him. I said, man, you played your ass off. He said it reminded me a lot of like Van Halen in the way that, and I meant it in a really positive way. He kind of was like, oh man, don't say that, man. I'm tired of being compared to Eddie and all that. I go, no, I didn't get to say it, but I kind of, my mind was like, no, I didn't mean it like that. I meant it like in a good way.
Right.
You have the fire like that, and I never saw Jake in person again after that. That was the one time. Huh. That was, 1981.
So did you see George Lynch in the clubs before Dokken? That was probably right on the cusp, right? That was when they were just getting going with Dokken, 81.
I think they maybe played in the clubs at that time, but I have the feeling that they were kind of working on their album at that time,
They
and
were.
maybe that's why.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I definitely didn't see George. There was, I mean, I thought Jake was really great. And then later, Warren DeMartini came out with
Right.
them, and trying to think, Carlos Cavazo was great. Oh, Chris Holmes, I remember seeing Chris, and he was cool. He was definitely more, he had that different sort of aggressive style going, but he had. Oh, and there was a guy called Chris Hagar
I've
that
heard that name.
he played with Rough Cut, but
There you go. There you go. Yeah.
before that, he played in a band called Sarge, and he was the first guy in LA that had, I think, one of the first guys that had a Floyd Rose. So Eddie had the Floyd Rose, and that was a big deal. And you couldn't get them because they were like custom made or whatever.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But he got one somehow, and he had it on a guitar, and then he had that thing happening,
right,
which was insane because you could never do that with a regular trombone.
Right.
And then he had two 50-watt Marshalls, and he had a Furman PQ3 to boost the mids and crank into the front end, and he had a Lexicon PCM 41 that became the LA thing, the PQ3 and PCM 41. The PCM 41, as you know, it had two outputs. One side was dry, and the other side had the modulation on it. So you'd go into that, and then you'd split it and go into the two heads, and you got one amp that's stable, and you got one amp that's slowly drifting a little bit with the modulation, and it came out with like that Randy Rhoads sound. That's kind of what it reminded me of. And then he's got the whammy bar. He's doing Van Halen stuff. So he was like, and I go, dude, your tone is just ripping. He goes, yeah, man, you gotta, it's gotta be with, you gotta have, he told me, he was like, you gotta have two amps and you gotta have one unaffected, and then you can get that sound. And so it took me a while. I didn't have the money to get, I had two amps, but I didn't have the money to get that other stuff. And so I had just a little MXR graphic EQ, and I cranked the mids on that, which kind of gave you that Randy sound or Eddie sound. And then I somehow acquired a MXR stereo chorus, and I found a way to split the signal coming out of the EQ into just mono on the stereo chorus, and then that went to one amp, and then the clean signal went to the other amp, and all of a sudden I hit a chord. I was like, "Wow, that's the sound. That's it." So.
The wet, dry, wet, early wet, dry, wet, right?
Yep.
And that became such an Eddie thing too later. When he went into the Hagar era, it became a bit. He was doing a little bit in the studio, but when they finally got to the Hagar era, that became a thing for him. That just came to the last years that he was doing it. Yeah,
he had. I think Eddie had so many innovative things that he didn't. And one of the things that I really loved, apparently Eddie didn't like it, was he didn't like the guitar off to one side and with the reverb on the other.
Right.
But I liked it. I thought it made it sound huge, and
it's a pseudo wet, dry, wet on a recording, right? I mean, that's sort of like what it is. It's sort of a pseudo wet, dry, wet. You got your more dry sound, and then you have a little bit of wet sound to one side.
Yeah, it just sounds great. I love it. And he kind of, after he got away from that, he never really went back to that. But
right.
But it was also great. Those Sammy records, the sound was killer too. But the early Van Halen was like that. It's just like anything. People go, "Oh yeah, man, Zeppelin Into the Outdoor," but the first album is insane.
Right.
It's always the early stuff with everybody that is right. Where
So as far as product innovation, you've been involved directly with product. Like you said, the Ruby amp, and you've been doing this for years. You've had all kinds of product endorsements. Ed's impact on the industry from a product side of it. What's your viewpoint of how he impacted gear throughout the years that he was around?
Big, massive. I mean, both him and Randy did. Um, and they didn't step on each other's toes to me. They were doing different things, but definitely, Eddie deciding to put a humbucker in a Strat. I don't know how it started. I've seen pictures of him playing, a Les Paul, for example.
Yep.
But then, first time I actually saw him play, he was playing the Strat. He got a humbucker in there and the whammy bar stuff. And I think '79 when I saw him, he had the very first Floyd Rose.
Right. Yeah, non-finer. Yeah, right. Exactly. Like Brad
So,
has.
right. That's right. So he immediately, people wanted to route out their Strat and get you wanted the whammy bar and you wanted a humbucker to get that bigger sound, because the Strat, you couldn't, single coil pickup. Nowadays, there's ways to get closer to that Eddie sound, but back in the time, there weren't really hot rodded single coil pickups. You just had as far as I remember, you just had the stock single coils. Right. And then the only hot rodded pickups that were coming out were Seymour DiMarzio. Mm-hmm. But that was mostly humbuckers. So that was a big innovation that really went massive to everywhere. Everybody put a humbucker in their guitar, and only Yngwie stayed with the single coil.
Right.
Yngwie and Ritchie and Jeff Beck, those guys,
Right.
But everybody else was going humbucker, I think. And
Super Strat. It was Super Strat crazy. You had Super Strats too, which is kind of odd. Yeah. How did you end up getting away from Super Strats? Well,
I started on Les Paul, and I just have an affinity for the guitar. Because it was my first guitar was a copy Les Paul. My second guitar was a Les Paul, a '73 Deluxe Gold Top, and I wasn't super into the gold at the time, but now it just makes me feel like a kid every time I pick it up. I got it right here.
That's cool.
An old one that I just got put together that is fabulous. But so during the '80s, I had my Les Paul, and then I had some other stuff, but I did have a Strat, a white Strat, and I took a drill and drilled out enough room to put a humbucker in it, and that was my Super Strat. And eventually, that had a Fender neck on it. And eventually, I was in the Guitar Center, and I saw a Jackson guitar, but it was a Super Strat with two humbuckers, and it had a Taylor tremolo on it. Mm-hmm. But it had that cool Jackson headstock, and I thought, man, I don't want to, I wasn't wanting to be a clone of anybody ever, mm-hmm. Although probably now it looks like I tried to, but I didn't want to. So I was like, I love that Jackson that Randy had, but that now I can play a Jackson because it's at the Strat body.
Right.
And so I ordered it. I got it, and that was my main guitar. And I had the Les Paul at home, and I had the Strat. Those were my three. And one day I cracked the headstock on the Jackson, and my friend at the time, my guitar tech, a guy called Jimmy Isaacs, who's really great guitar tech. I cracked it. He goes, "Oh man, we're gonna have to take that down to Jackson and get them to fix it." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Yeah, we can go down there." He called up. He talked to Grover's wife, Joanne, and made an appointment. We go down there. I met Joanne. She was super nice, and I was like, she goes, "Yeah, oh, Grover's here. Hey, Grover, come here. This is Doug and Jimmy. Oh, hey, what's up? Wow, Grover, it's really nice to meet you, man. Blah blah blah." I was like, fanning out on him, fanboy, right. And he's like, I think we can fix this guitar for you, no problem. I was like, thank you, because I was really bummed. It wasn't broken all the way through, but it was cracked, right, the headstock. Right. And And then I said, hey, is there any chance I could get a Charvel neck off you guys? And he goes, yeah, just go over to that pile over there and pick one. So I go, found a neck, I picked it. I was like, well, that's nice. So that went on my Strat.
Okay,
And that
cool.
Charvel went on my Strat. And eventually I got a Floyd put on that guitar.
Wow.
And I picked up Mike Jackson when it was ready. And Grover, I was like, Grover, I'd really love to work with you. And, he eventually was like, okay, I'm not going to give you a bunch of guitars, but when you need something, you let me know. And welcome to the family. And I was like, wow, that's cool. So that's how I got into the whole Jackson thing. And it was good. He would surprise me like once a year with a guitar, and I would put an order in and it would take months and months and months. And then I didn't never want to bother him, so I would never ask him about it. But then he'd call me and go, hey, Doug, do you want to have lunch next week? Or like, say it's Monday or Tuesday today. Like, hey, Doug, you want to have lunch on Thursday? I'm like, yeah. Okay, I'll see you Thursday. Just get here around 10 a.m. We'll go have lunch. And I was like, maybe. It turned out, I get into the office and he's sitting in his office. I was very impressed with being in Grover Jackson's office. It was really cool. He had a big old desk. And then he's like, you want to go eat something? And I kept seeing a guitar case in the corner. And I was like, yeah, Grover. I was like disappointed. Like, why does he just want to have lunch with me? What's up with that? They're like, oh, by the way, your guitar's ready. I'm like, and I'd go running over there behind his desk and grab the case and open it up. And he'd be like, yeah, man, it turned out really nice. And I'm like, holy shit, Grover, this is insane. Or whatever words I used. I don't even remember how he used to talk. And we'd go to lunch, and he was always super cool. And then I would just be like on cloud nine for the next year. He goes, like I said, I'm not going to give you a lot of guitars, but what you need, I want you to, every guitar is different. They all have their own personality. I didn't realize it at the time, but he was absolutely right. Every instrument, there's no two that are exactly the same, at least that I know of.
Right.
And he said, everyone, it's a different piece of wood. It's got a different personality. You need to learn that each one. You need to really learn about it, like get to know it as your friend or whatever. And so I did. And eventually Grover, he took care of me. I had a half dozen guitars or something. And he eventually, he kind of got an offer to get bought out, I think, or something. And once he left the company, it wasn't the same. I did do it like a signature run with a Japanese side of Jackson, and that was cool and stuff. But it was never, I don't know, when he left, it kind of just, I was kind of going back to older guitars at that point. It was like early 90s. And I had been leaning a lot on the Strats, and so I kind of went to that. I was with Fender for a short time. And that's why I met John Suhr, actually. He was at Fender.
Right.
And I had a Les Paul that had P90s, and he rewound those P90s for me. And still to this day, that's one of my best sounding Les Pauls, is this one that John rewound.
Right.
And then I was, they made me a Super Strat. I got a couple Strats I still have this one black one and a green, Daphne blue one that I use for Dio a lot. And I had a gold one that got broken, and I ended up just selling it as a, like something somebody could put on their wall. It wasn't really playable. It was broken.
Right.
But
yeah, Grover was, he was like part of that community back then. I mean, I also ate dinner with Grover one night and was like I was like a kid in the candy store in his shop. He got him to tell me every story about Randy and everybody he'd worked with, and it was really cool to hang out with him. And he had a personality, or he has a personality. He just sort of like was entrenched with everybody in town, and Well, he was also really smart about a lot of things, not just guitars. He is a very smart individual, and he was very inspiring because he would say stuff like,
I'd be like, Grover, what was the most amazing concert you ever saw? And he would say, I think it was P-Funk. And I'm like, P-Funk? He goes, man, he had a southern accent. He goes, man, Doug, you would never have believed it if you seen it. I saw it. I was there with my own two eyes, and I swear to God, that stage went off the ground that night. It lifted off the ground. And he's like, Bootsy came out and did this, and the smoke, and the this, and the that, and the P-Funk. There was nothing like it, that sound, and they made the stage fly. And I believed them, But he had all these stories, and he said, he told me about the black and yellow Strat Eddie picked up, and
right.
when he needed a guitar for the photo shoot, and it wasn't even like wired up yet or working apparently,
Right.
and different stuff about he didn't talk. We talked about Randy a few times, but I don't know. It was still kind of
Raw,
a little raw. Maybe you didn't really want to talk about that.
Yeah.
We're working with closely with Tommy, and then later Rudy. It took me a long time to muster up the courage to ask Tommy about the stuff,
Right.
And once he told me the story, it was like, wow, that's.
Let me ask you about a couple things you did. You did these tribute records where you did Van Halen songs and you did Randy Rhoads songs, right?
Yeah.
Just tell me about these two tribute albums you did and what songs you did.
Okay, for the Ozzy, did you say Ozzy and Van Halen?
Yeah, you did two different ones, right?
Yeah, I mean, I did a lot of those things. It was the guy, full circle, Bob Kulick, who played on Creatures of the Night, and then Bruce got in the band of Kiss. Bob was a producer, and he discovered that these tribute records were pretty popular, and he'd hire different people, these different lineups, and he and I somehow we met. Actually, I was doing a session for Wasp, and he was on that album. That's how we met. And he invited me to play on the Ozzy one, and I believe it was Crazy Train.
Okay.
And it's Crazy Train with I think Dee Snider on vocals, and I don't remember the rhythm section. Probably Frankie Banali. He used Frankie a lot. And that was I need to listen to it because I don't remember what I did, but he would be like, don't play it like how Randy played it, do it how something different. Because if people want to hear the Randy version, they're going to go listen to Randy, and we want to hear the Doug. We want to hear what you would do.
Right.
So I actually don't even remember.
You did the Van Halen one too, though, right? You said you did.
The Van Halen one. That one was. I remember that one was pretty cool because a lot of people really liked the tone that I had on that, and it was this Marshall that I still have. It's just in my studio. It's a 79 JMP Mark IV, whatever. And then the engineer was this guitar player called Bruce Boyer. And Bruce played with. So he was and he was engineering all these tribute records at that time. And we went for this kind of. I don't know what he was messing around, and he just got a compression going that was really had this spank to it, like you'd hit a note. It was kind of reminding me of the sound of Mean Streets, the intro guitar. It had this little really cool compression to it, and it just made everything I did pop.
What song?
And,
what song was it?
I'm the One.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, so I did that my own way. I couldn't figure out. This was before YouTube and all that stuff. I just did my own way how to do some of the licks and stuff. But then it turned out pretty good. And like I say, the sound had a big deal to do with that because it just made everything pop. And a lot of people commented about that.
Wow. Well, thanks for coming on today, man. I'll let you head on to your next thing. It's great to meet you at NAMM, of course, and I've seen you a couple times there. When I see you there next year, I will say hello.
Absolutely, Jeff. Thank you. I love your background there. It's amazing.
Thank you,
if I could grab one of those guitars, take a guess which one I would grab.
The Rhoads.
Nope.
No.
I do love the Rhoads, but I've never played the Sharp.
Oh,
Never played the Shark. That looks my buddy. Do you know Frankie Lindia?
Of course. I actually interviewed him for this.
Frankie is an amazing guitar player.
I know,
and
right?
He's got all those guitars. I need to hit him up.
There you
We
go.
were talking, all the time see you or somebody else in town, like, hey, let's get a coffee, let's hang out, and it's like, yeah, let's do it. And then inevitably I get busy with family, schedule, practice for my kids, whatever.
Totally.
So Frankie and I were talking, let's get together, man. I'll bring over some guitars and we'll play some licks. And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Now I want to do it. It's like, we didn't do it, but I gotta try out that Shark.
Well, tell him your buddy Jeff said hey, and that it's time for you to play the Shark.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Jeff. I really appreciate it. All the best, and
thank you, brother.
And you take care of yourself. God bless.
You too, man. I'll see you at NAMM next year.
All right, brother.
Bye-bye.